We are talking about things that affect group performance. So group norms. Group norms are sort of the standards, the cultural things. Again, you go back to the Hawthorne experiments with girls in the factory. There were certain group norms, or I mentioned the guys, right, would punch each other when somebody worked too hard or too slow and didn't make the standard rate. They would actually hit each other on the shoulder, not beating each other up. But anyway, so group norms, sometimes they're enforced physically, sometimes emotionally, psychologically. So we think the group norms are the standards of which the appropriateness of behavior of team members is judged. So it's okay to do that. It's okay to get loud and get in somebody's face if they're wrong. Or maybe that's never okay to raise your voice in a meeting, right? If I would suggest that many construction companies settle things one way and bankers might settle things another way. Right? Those are based on group norms. Right? And those are okay because they tell us how to behave. They give us cues on what's okay, what's not okay. And they can certainly result from things like the personality characteristics of the members. They can result from the situation. This situation is different than other situations, right? Or the historical traditions of the group, like the owner or the original members of the group, how did they behave? And typically others will fall in line with those. Right? And those are enforced by the group on group members, particularly new group members. So why do we have norms? It helps the group survive, but it also increases the predictability of expected behaviors. We know what's appropriate. We know how they're going to take it. We know who's going to put up with what, how we're going to address each other. If I do something, how the others in the group are going to react, and so forth. Right? And it certainly helps a group avoid embarrassing situations because we've set boundaries on behaviors. Right? And it's all part of expressing in the groups here their central identity. And all this leads to group cohesiveness. So cohesiveness is sort of a separate measure, but to which the group is staying together. They like each other, right? So we see a certain attraction to being in this group, and I don't want to work to a different group. We see that in college students. I don't want to move out of my room, or I don't want to move out of my dorm floor because I'm used to these people. I may not particularly love them, but I'm used to them, and better the devil you know than the devil you don't know. Sometimes the factors that increase cohesiveness, because cohesive groups tend to do better. So factors that increase it, if they're homogeneous, if the group's been together long, if the group has a smaller size, if there's lots of interaction between the group members, if there's very clear goals, and if there's success, right? This is working. That will increase cohesiveness. People don't like to be part of things that are failing. Right? They like to be part of things that are successful, right? These factors that increase cohesiveness lead to these consequences. There's more goal accomplishment. There's more personal satisfaction for the team members. There's increased quantity and quality of the interactions among the team member, right? But it can lead to groupthink. So groupthink is a word we haven't had before. And groupthink is when it's more important for group members to agree than it is to get to the truth. So even though you go back to the child story where the emperor has no clothes, everybody kept saying how beautiful the emperor's robes were and how fantastic he looked and all that, when in fact he wasn't wearing anything, right? The old story was, what was it? If you weren't worthy of your position, you couldn't see this fantastic new clothes this guy was weaving with the gold threads and the gems and all of that in it, right? So everybody was scared to admit they didn't see it. So you end up with the leader, king or whoever he was, parading around naked and everybody admiring his beautiful gowns because they didn't want to seem like they were unworthy. So groupthink is a little bit like that. A famous example would be when the space shuttle Challenger blew up at takeoff, right after takeoff, when they fired it off when it was too cold. There were engineers who knew those engines wouldn't take the cold weather. You're not supposed to use it below freezing. It's not designed for that. They're in Florida. They knew that was an issue, but they were really behind on their launches. And together, these very smart people thought, from a business standpoint, they really, really needed to launch that thing. So one of the managers said, I literally took off my engineering hat and put on my manager's hat and said it would be okay. But the whole group agreed to it. It was more important to agree than get down to the physics of, hey, these seals on the rocket engines won't work when it's 32 or less, and we could kill these people, and when in fact that's exactly what happened. So how do you get around groupthink? Think about that. How would you stop a group from having groupthink? Right? What might you do? Kind of pause that over for a second. Right. One of the ways we advise to do that is a position called the devil's advocate. And the devil's advocate's job is to challenge all assumptions and decisions. How do you know that? How do you know that's true? Where does that idea come from? Right? It's not that they don't believe it. It's that they make them prove it. Right? I'm not saying you're wrong, or I'm not saying that what you just said isn't true. But how do you know that? And where's devil's advocate comes from, the Catholic Church, when they have a hearing to see if they're going to make a saint out of a Catholic person. They have somebody challenge the evidence. So somebody comes in and says they've performed a miracle, and then the question is, how do you know that? How do you know this thing actually happened, and so forth? And how do you know there's not some other explanation for it? So they have a hearing, and the devil's advocate, he's like the attorney, and whether he thinks it's true or not is irrelevant. His job is to challenge all the assumptions, and then the idea is, after those challenges have been met, those making the decision can say, okay, we've looked at all the facts, we've had this hearing, now we've challenged all the assertions, and we found the assertions to be true. The challenges brought forth the evidence, and the assertions held up, therefore we think this thing is true. Right? So that's the devil's advocate. And so if you have somebody in a group who does that, it can save you from making bad mistakes. So I used to belong to a stock investment club. So there were some of us got together once a month. There were dues to pay. We each kicked in a little bit of money every month, and we made our own mutual fund. And there's a lot of these out there. If you're interested in learning about the stock market, I highly recommend it. And they're called investment clubs. Just look them up. There'll be one in your area. And so we found out somebody would come to the meeting and all excited, hey, I got a hot tip on a stock. We should buy such and such stock. And a couple times we fell for it, and we all voted to buy this stock on this person's recommendation, and then whatever the hot tip was, whatever the big news was, didn't happen. So we lost some money, or didn't make any money anyway. So we decided to adopt the devil's advocate. So there was a guy on the club. His job was to challenge all the assertions. Now, he wasn't a lawyer, but he sort of talked like one, and he was really good at that, so he didn't mind doing that. And we all understood it wasn't personal, it was just getting to the facts. So when somebody would say, this company is going to make a lot of money in the future, he would say, how do you know that? And they say, because they're going to come out with this new product. Well, how do you know that? Well, here's the press announcement, they're going to make this new product. Well, how do you know this new product's going to sell a lot? Well, let's take a look at the product, and no one can decide that. Let's look as a group and decide. And then if we decide, yeah, that looks like something that's really going to sell, right, then maybe we should buy the stock. But just the fact that we had somebody there challenging all assertions, even though people knew that guy was going to be at the table challenging their assertions, still people could not help themselves and come to the table with some hot stock info, and then he would ask them a couple questions, and real quickly, in one or two questions, it became clear that the person didn't have any data to back up their claim, and we probably shouldn't do it. Not that we shouldn't do it ever, but we shouldn't do it until we got some data to indicate it was the right thing to do. And I think we saved ourselves a lot of money in the long haul by doing that. All right, let's look down here in the green section. Factors that decrease cohesiveness, right? So heterogeneous compositions. We got lots of different people, lots of different backgrounds. That's not going to help with our cohesiveness. It's a new team. It's a large team. It's physically dispersed. It's spread out all over like the virtual teams, right? Has ambiguous goals. They're not really sure what they're supposed to be doing, and there's a high probability of failure, or it's failing already, right? Those are really going to hurt. And what are the consequences? They're going to have difficulty achieving goals. It's liable to be disbanded. People aren't going to be talking to each other very much, and there's going to be low commitment to the organizational goals, right? So all that certainly affects the cohesiveness of the group. And certainly rewards for the team are all part of this. So we'll get to that on the next slide.